Good evening. And welcome back to our month of Halloween.
This time, we're making a list of the top 10 creepiest MLP episodes. Ooh.
But before we get into it, let's establish a few things. First off, these aren't reviews. We aren't talking about how good or bad these episodes may be, only how unsettling the ideas they put forth are. So keep that in mind. Secondly, calling an episode of Friendship is Magic disturbing really isn't saying much. But that doesn't mean that this show can't do some pretty weird stuff from time to time.
So let's get this list started.
All will know the wonder of my darkened jeweled sky when all the world is wrapped in an eternal lullaby. So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
Do you ever get the feeling you're being watched?
I'm sticking right by your side. Always.
In this episode, the Apple family decides that Apple Bloom is old enough to stay alone at home by herself. But Applejack still fears for her sister's safety, and after discovering her in the middle of a big mess, turns into a complete stalker.
Whoa!
As the episode goes on, it becomes more and more clear that Apple Bloom doesn't have any privacy. Applejack keeps checking in on her over and over, trying to find out everything she does. She even goes so far as to check on Apple Bloom while she's sleeping. The episode really plays into the fear that people have of losing all their privacy to someone who doesn't even have their best interests in mind.
Kinda creepy, which is why it's on the list. Apple Bloom decides to go and deliver some pies herself and runs into this large monster as she's on her way. It's got a lion, a goat, and a snake head. Each of them are sisters and they can't seem to agree on anything. They are a pretty freaky bunch and there's really not much else to say.
Well, except for the fact that the monster wants to eat Apple Bloom.
We're going to have our apple pie with a side of Billy Filet.
And not only does the monster have a rather detailed design compared to a lot of the more cute-looking animals on this show, but the area it inhabits is also frightening. Everywhere that Apple Bloom turns, flames shoot up from the ground, trying to burn her alive. So yeah, it's either get brutally killed by a giant monster and fire geysers, or have Applejack watch you in your sleep. Pick your poison.
Don't worry, I'll always be here for you. Always.
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
And speaking of sister issues,
Make it stop! Princess Luna, can you hear me?
For whom the sweet bell toils. This definitely has a very creepy vibe, especially when the dream part kicks in. Sweetie Belle has a series of nightmares all wrapped into one about her sister and failing. She feels really overshadowed by her and she's really stressed out by it, and it creates a really creepy dream scene with Luna making it happen.
you know how some people feel like they're being outshined by someone else? Well, in Equestria, that feeling can come to life in your dreams and try to kill you with lightning.
Ah yes, the wonderful wacky world of fantasy.
But before Sweetie Belle can be blasted into bits, she gets saved by Princess Luna, who shows her how Rarity was actually just trying to help her. But while normally Luna's appearance means that the horrors are over, in this episode she actually winds up causing part of the nightmare. See, Sweetie Belle had already sabotaged one of Rarity's designs out of anger, and in the last moments of the dream, Princess Luna shows her what will happen to Rarity as a result.
But this is impossible. I checked and rechecked everything.
Listen to my sister!
It's an extremely creepy scene, the creepiest out of all of it, showing Rarity breaking down into basic insanity.
Oh, I checked and rechecked. Check, recheck, recheck, and recheck.
A bit of a reaction, but it's Rarity.
This is the worst possible thing. How can I possibly finish my latest creation if I can't find it?
So don't try and sabotage your siblings' plans, or else it will come back to haunt you in your nightmares.
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
Oh look, more bad dreams! but this time it's Apple Bloom.
In Bloom and Gloom, Apple Bloom has a reoccurring nightmare of her getting her cutie mark and not liking it. It ranges from being a pest pony to all over the place.
Some of the things that happened in this episode would never fly if it were in a dream, like Apple Bloom getting electrocuted. Or being literally disowned by her family.
And we don't have room for non-apples. Time for you to mosey on.
But this is my home!
And you're gonna have to change your name. I think just Blue has a nice ring to it.
The episode really captures the feeling of being trapped in a terrible situation, as each time Apple Bloom tries to leave the dream, she just wakes up into a different one.
There was also that weird voice.
More trouble with cutie marks? Sounds to me like cutie marks and trouble are two peas in the same pod. If your cutie mark bothers you so much, get rid of it.
It kept telling her that it can help her, but it only made things worse in the end. Way to go, you!
Of course, Princess Luna does manage to step in at the last possible moment, but up until then, the tension just keeps escalating, with each dream being progressively weirder than the last. It comes to a head during the third nightmare, where all logic just gets thrown out the window to have Apple Bloom tossed into a black hole because of her cutie mark. Sweet dreams.
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
Now let's leave the world of nightmares for a moment and focus on the terrifying creatures that inhabit the real world. Case in point,
How does it feel, knowing that soon every Pegasus, unicorn, and earth pony will bow to my will?
This one is about TRex and Twilight. It isn't exactly the most creepy, but it definitely has that vibe.
and that's largely because of TRex himself, who's one of the show's most menacing villains ever.
I am Lord T-Rex, and I will take what should have been mine long ago.
His main ability is stealing magic from other characters, which is pretty frightening in and of itself. Think about it, so much of a pony's talent is related to the magic of their cutie mark. What TRex does essentially strips away all of their abilities.
TRex is basically rampaging by the end of it, destroying Twilight's homes, sending the princesses to Tartarus, trapping the main six and Discord,
How about a trade, Princess Twilight?
and just being completely and utterly villainous.
And he gets so close to succeeding, probably closer than any villain on this show has ever gotten to completely defeating our heroes. Combine that with his powerful, authoritative voice and the way he just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and you really start to wonder what Equestria would have looked like if he had had his way.
It would probably look a lot like a smoldering black gap. And so would a lot of the rest of the world too. Wonderful.
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
TRex isn't the only frightening villain on Friendship is Magic.
My cursed slaves.
Meet King Sombra.
1,000 years ago, King Sombra, a unicorn whose heart was black as night, took over the Crystal Empire.
King Sombra is the old leader of the Crystal Empire. He's basically shadows for most of the episode, but by the end, we definitely have a lot of creepy scenes with Sombra as a whole. There's also that door that shows you your worst fear,
Ponyville? Well, how did I get... No!
which definitely added effect.
If TRex came closest to succeeding with his plan, King Sombra came second closest. And while TRex's overconfidence led to him not being very well prepared for Twilight's tree magic, Sombra was more than prepared for people to try and thwart his plans. Knowing that the Crystal Heart was the only thing that could defeat him, he made sure to hide it in a castle that almost no one could access, filled with booby traps like the door Leia mentioned earlier. The Crystal Ponies also seemed genuinely terrified of him, and throughout the episode almost seemed to be going through some kind of post-traumatic stress.
But I can't seem to remember anything before King Sombra came to power.
It's very unsettling, although if there's one thing keeping this episode from being higher on the list, it's King Sombra's voice.
That is mine.
I don't know, something about him just sounds too silly for such a big threat.
Too many deep effects. But either way, the next one is...
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
Vampire bats will give you a fright. Eating apples both day and night. They rest for a minute, maybe 3. Then they're eating every apple in your apple tree.
Now here's some spookiness that's a little bit closer to home. Applejack's farm gets infested with what she refers to as vampire fruit bats. At first it doesn't seem like much, but these things actually have a pretty weird looking design. And when they try to get rid of them, the spell they cast backfires and turns Fluttershy into a bat.
That apple, it looks so juicy and sweet.
Flutterbat. They eventually end up catching the Flutterbat, reversing the spell, making Fluttershy do the stare on herself. Flutterbat is definitely fairly creepy. I mean, she can drain an apple in 2 seconds flat.
Not only that, but the entire sequence of them trying to find and catch her is pretty creepy as well.
Who's there?
The music is ominous, and the darkly lit setting of the orchard makes for quite a frightening place to encounter a monster.
True. Moving on to the next number.
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
What's the matter? It's just a dark hallway full of disembodied pony legs.
Castlemania. This episode mainly consists of a lot of traps in Luna and Celestia's old castle. The randomness of it and the darkness of the forest definitely makes a creepy vibe.
We also get a ghost story in this episode that paints the whole scenario in a darker light.
When Nightmare Moon was banished, not every last bit of her dark magic went with her. When night falls on the castle, that magic takes the form of the Pony of Shadows!
A lot of the creepy things that happen in this episode are attributed to the mystical Pony of Shadows, a dark being that apparently haunts the castle. There's a really creepy, quiet vibe as the main 6 all wander around the castle, getting caught in its many strange secret passages, and then there's that mystery figure playing the organ.
You hear that?
Which happens to be Pinky. At the end of the episode, though, we do get to see the actual Pony of Shadows, which is left unexplained.
So was the Pony of Shadows real, or just a figment of your imagination? Only time will tell.
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
Clock is ticking, Twilight. Clock is ticking.
This is definitely an extremely creepy episode, where Twilight just completely loses it. She goes completely insane over a stupid letter to the princess.
Have you ever had an assignment that was due the next day but you couldn't come up with any way to get it done? For Twilight Sparkle, when she can't come up with anything to write for the princess, she winds up completely losing her mind, making strange faces and trying to make a friendship problem so that she has something to report to Princess Celestia.
Hi, girls.
Of course, it gets extremely out of hoof, and eventually causes all of Ponyville to fall in love with a doll. It gets resolved in the end, of course, by Celestia, but for a very good portion of the episode, Twilight is completely cuckoo.
I'd hate to cause a rift between such good friends.
And let's talk about that doll. When Twilight can't get the CMC to fight over her Smarty Pants doll, she enchants it with the Want It Need It spell, which causes everyone who looks at the doll to want it so badly that it consumes them. It's probably the most terrifying magic spell on this show to not come from a villain. I mean, this is straight up mind control here, and it sends the town spiraling into chaos.
Definitely not the norm.
And while Twilight is overreacting, there are times when her fear seems almost too real.
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
Sometimes creepiness comes from a place where you really don't expect it. A small town in the middle of nowhere? What harm could that do? Oh, no.
Life is a smile in our town. Our cutie marks the same.
This episode was filled to the brim with creepy smiles and gruesome cutie mark removals, which explains why it's so high up on our list.
It's all thanks to this one small, seemingly normal unicorn named Starlight Glimmer.
We're happy to have any pony who wants to experience true friendship for the first time.
She claims to believe in a world without special talents, and has removed the cutie marks of everyone in her town to try and create this vision. The citizens in this town all seem ever so slightly off.
Please, join us!
We love new friends!
All of them are forced to smile constantly, be the same, and be happy. A classic.
And while there are other episodes on this list that do creepy things, a lot of the time there's still something silly and comedic about it. Even Lesson 0 did this, with Twilight's weirdness largely being for comedy. Sure, it was dark comedy, but still just goofy enough to not seem completely serious. But here they're playing it completely for drama, as the main 6 get their cutie marks forcibly removed. The process actually looks really painful. And even after Starlight Glimmer is revealed as a lying cult leader, she doesn't ever change her ways, instead running off to who knows where.
I brought you friendship. I brought you equality. I created harmony!
And for the final, utmost creepiest episode,
So say goodnight at this, the final setting of the sun. Tomorrow dawns in darkness, the night time has begun.
You'll notice that none of the episodes on this list are from Season 1, and that's because that season was by far the least creepy season of the bunch. I've read that Lauren Forrest had to deal with very strict guidelines of working on Season 1, and it really shows. Almost no scary imagery or dark themes managed to get through, but there was one time where the show suddenly grew dark and freaked out everyone.
Thank you all so much for coming. It means so much to Gummy.
this is what the fandom calls Pinkamena, or Pinkamena. I never knew how to pronounce it, but this is the darker side of Pinkie Pie.
Oh, they're not so bad.
For a lot of moments in the episode, she definitely belongs in a mental facility. She's making bags of flour and rocks and stuff talk. And her hair is completely flat.
But more than Pinkie's creepy antics, what makes this episode number 1 is that this is a twist that no one was expecting. All throughout the first season, Friendship is Magic built up its reputation as being the nicest, fluffiest thing since Cream Puffs. And even this episode stayed relatively silly and lighthearted for most of its length. But then, right at the end, came Pinkie's mental breakdown. This was the first time that MLP ever decided to go the dark, bizarre route. Every other episode on this list came out in a time when we knew that Friendship is Magic could be creepy. Not this one.
You know what? I'm not gonna speak to them ever again. And I'm not gonna invite them to another party as long as I live. They don't deserve to be invited to my party.
Thank you, one and all for watching, and have a very spoopy Halloween.
Now the hour has come at last, the soft and fading light has crossed the west horizon and has bidden us good night. And what a lovely night it is to walk a moonlit field, to see the softer shades that are by starlight now revealed. So why is it that now when all is quiet and at rest,
And after the Halloween season has finished,